I think there's this magical thinking that's going on in Washington, D.C., and corporate news, and in a lot of places right now regarding the Israel-Iran conflict. And look, people know on this show we have a lot of care for the Holy Land, and we're generally very anti-war when it comes down to it. We don't like war. We know these things spiral out of control. And yet there are people who are just straight up attacking you, or, not you personally, but attacking me and others, Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, others, for simply raising a few skeptical points regarding this thing. And I just thought it was incredible that you, with the platform that you have, were willing to also voice some of the concerns, and really from the perspective of veterans and units that had lost members and lost brothers and lost family members in the wars that we just finished fighting in the Middle East.
Well, thank you. And all I was trying to do was speak up the way that the American people spoke up in this last election. 60% of Americans don't want to see more U.S. military involvement in the Middle East. That poll just came out yesterday. And unfortunately, 60% of voices in media aren't reflecting that. And, I'm looking at people like Mark Levin. And Mark Levin is loud doesn't mean that he's right. Actually, I would love to debate Mark Levin. I would love to debate him. Mark, if anybody is watching, Mark, I would love to debate you. Jack, maybe you can host us on your show. We could do it on Mark's show anytime, any place, anywhere. But just because Mark is being, and I mean it. When it comes to something as serious as the U.S. getting involved again in the Middle East, we should have that debate. And just because somebody is loud doesn't mean that they're right. I don't know much about Mark Levin. I know that he has said that he wouldn't vote for President Trump. I know that he said that, direct quote, "I'm not accountable for any of the dumb things President Trump and his supporters say." I know that Mark Levin is out there calling millions of Americans unpatriotic for not wanting to get involved in the Middle East again. So he's calling 60% of Americans unpatriotic. I think that's really dangerous rhetoric. I think that is the same rhetoric that was used during the Iraq War to try and manipulate the American public into buying the lie that Iraq had WMDs. You were told that, unless you buy the lie that Iraq has WMDs, you're not patriotic. The Dixie Chicks were canceled for that, for speaking out against President Bush because they didn't want to go to war. They were canceled by the right, by the way. I don't think millions of Americans are unpatriotic for not wanting to go to war in the Middle East again. And it's leftist rhetoric that he's using too. Like, that is the same tactic that the left uses. If you don't want millions of unvetted illegal immigrants pouring into your country, you're unpatriotic, because America is a nation of immigrants and we're supposed to welcome the cold, the tired, the poor, the huddled masses. And if you don't like that, you don't like illegal immigrants coming to your country, you're unpatriotic. So I don't agree with calling millions of Americans, 60% of Americans, unpatriotic for not wanting that. I don't think Mark Levin speaks for Americans under 30. I mean, President Trump always talks about how proud he is that he won the youth vote by 30 points, that he won young men overwhelmingly. And it's not, if the American military is to get involved again in the Middle East, God forbid, it's not going to be Mark Levin that gets sent to the front lines. If we were to drop Mark Levin in Iran, that would be quite the bunker buster, because he's a large guy. But it wouldn't be Mark Levin being sent to the front lines of Iran. It would be young men under 30. And I don't feel like the voices in media are painting an accurate picture of what war could look like. We're not having that conversation. We didn't have that conversation leading up to the Iraq War. We're not having that conversation now. But something I would point out is back in 2003, during the Iraq War, women couldn't serve in combat. They can now. And I don't think the American public is ready to see images of women that look like me being blown up by IEDs. And I don't think that's a good thing for President Trump's legacy either. President Trump has done so much to make sure that men can't participate in women's sports. Why are we now going to go burn all of that by letting women get blown up in combat in the Middle East? That's not something that I stand for. That's not something that I think would be good for his legacy. I was really grateful that the president said he's going to pursue this 2-week time period. And what I'm concerned about is voices in the American media trying to undermine the president's decision to pursue peace and to pursue negotiation over the course of these 2 weeks or sooner. But my offer stands. Mark Levin, Katie Pavlich, any of these voices, happy to debate anytime, anywhere. If you want to do 2-on-1, happy to do it. But it's an important debate and we should have it.
Well, Caroline, I mean, I've seen the same tenor of their comments out there, and I've seen the way that they're talking, as if you are some kind of traitor to the United States for raising basic questions. Or, me, I put on my military officer hat and I say, well, okay, well, how many missiles do you have? And how many interceptors? How does the Iron Dome actually work? And can they sustain something like this? These bunker busters, you get this magical thinking that I can always say, oh, it's go one hit and it's going to be done. They're not going to have nukes anymore. I said, really? You sure about that? Have you ever put together a targeting package? Have you ever run strikes like this? Have you ever participated in one of these operations? Because guess what? That's exactly what amateurs say. People have never actually looked at one of these problem sets or done anything like this before, because you never know what the strike is going to look like until afterwards, especially a massive and completely novel strike like the one you're talking about here. And they say, oh, we're going to have one bunker buster, and then the second one's going to come in and it's going to burrow down deeper after the first bunker buster. I'm like, what are you guys, like, this is like Star Wars, and it's Luke Skywalker and, Obi-Wan Kenobi, turn off your targeting. He's going up against the Death Star with the heat vest. Guys, you're watching a little bit too much Marvel. Like, can we have a serious conversation about military matters here? And maybe we talk to some people who have been in the military and actually look at this. And by the way, that's nothing against the training. That's nothing against the patriotism and the grit and valor of the soldiery and the airmen and pilots. It's just reality. Okay, we're just talking about reality. We're talking about math. We're talking about physics. And the physics aren't necessarily on our side. And a lot of the people that have been looking at this problem set, particularly with this Fordo facility, say, wait a minute, the physics on hitting this thing are going to be extremely hard. It's very complicated. It's going to take potentially, and Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer was just on here saying you might need 10 runs on this thing. So 10 B-2 bombers, or 5 if you use in tandem with the dual drop bays, to be able to knock this thing out. And that's 10, 5 to 10 hits. Who knows what could happen, right? And it just comes down to that. Who knows? Are Americans, I'm just going to say it, are Americans prepared, even in this limited strike, prepared to see what would happen if Iran were able to shoot down a B-2 bomber? And that the amount of video that you would see on some of that, or God forbid, a malfunction or something like that. And I'm not saying it's likely. I'm just saying you have to consider these things when you're conducting military planning for an operation over Indian country, or an operation over hostile territory like that. All of these things need, when we were, I served in, I was stationed in Guam a couple of times. And when they ran the invasions into Guam, there were people who didn't track the depth of the mud and the depth of the water. And there were times that during the invasion of Guam that Marines would be jumping out, and these kids, 18, 19 years old, would be jumping out fully loaded up, fully kitted down with packages and grenades and weapons and ammo. And they were so heavy that they sank right into the sand. They sank right in the sand and they couldn't get out. Right? And we saw this, you saw it in D-Day as well. And I'm sorry, but before we get into any of those conversations, we better darn well know what we're talking about before any single American gets sent into something like that.